Hi guys, welcome. If you're new here, my name's Nikki. I'm a beekeeper and I make beekeeping videos. If that's something you like watching, hit the subscribe button. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you so much for coming back and listening to what I have to say. I really appreciate it. Today I'm going to do our 12th inspection on our newest hive of honeybees. I'm going to get my suit on and smoker going and we'll get started. Okay, give them some smoke. I'm going to see how much progress they've made in this past week. I don't think it's going to be a lot in comparison to previous weeks because we're in dearth. If you watched my last video in the series, you know that I'm not going to smoke the bees up here in the super, and I do check them last. It is a very, very hot and humid day today. Not wanting to come. There we go. And sometimes when the humidity gets up, your bees don't really like you being in the hive. Because they like the hive a very specific humidity to turn that nectar into honey. They will evaporate the water content or the moisture content out of it to make honey. So they really try hard to keep the hive at a specific humidity. Not a lot of activity up here in the super. So I am going to take their queen excluder off today. Go ahead and take this super off. Amount of bees up here, really on the outer frames, which is somewhat unusual. They typically go to the inside frames, but we shall check out what's down here in these boxes. I will smoke them a bit. I use the syrup and the smoke during dearth. The syrup keeps them from really kind of packing down into that bottom box, and the sugar syrup keeps them from flying around. The reason that I use the smoke is that it does mask pheromones. So I use less smoke when I use the sugar syrup, but I like to use a little bit to mask any alarm pheromone. And just make your hive inspection go a little easier. Lots of very sticky propolis because it's so hot today. So that's our queen excluder. I'm going to leave that off. Lots of bees up here. Just going to go ahead and give them a little bit more sugar syrup since I got that excluder off. I'm going to smoke them right here at the edge so I can get to this first frame. So they had a couple frames still up here in this top box. Again, I don't think I'm going to see a ton of progress. We've had a couple rainy days this past week, and even a little bit of rain really does decrease the bees' productivity for the rest of the day, at least in my opinion. Lots of bees on this outer frame. They are storing syrup in this frame. And I don't see any eggs, which is kind of typical for your outer frames. This used to be a brood frame. This was a brood frame. I still have some capped brood on here, but they are backfilling this one still with the sugar syrup. So I just bring that up so you can see it. You can see still got a little bit of capped brood left there, but the rest they are backfilling with syrup. And looks similar to last week. This side is all syrup. Move you guys over. Move my smoker over. You can kind of see the areas that I put my smoker beside each hive because it's got burnt grass there. I need to mix it up a little bit week to week where I put it. Oh, they've got a little bit more drawn out on this frame. And on this side we've got some capped brood, some eggs, larvae, and some syrup that they are starting to cap over. So you can see there we've got capped brood, some eggs, some larvae that aren't capped yet, and some capped syrup up at the top. And this frame, they have gotten a tiny amount more drawn out on this frame than they did have last week. So it is good to see them making some progress in drawing out during dearth. Lots and lots of bees up here, as you can see, coming up to get that sugar syrup. Give them a little bit more. And I'm going to switch these girls to one of the community feeders over here on this side. Get out of my way. And I've got a frame of capped brood here. I don't see my queen. And I've got a frame of syrup and some eggs and a couple drone cells on here. But they have a lot of the syrup capped on this frame. So you can see on this side we've got some new eggs in there. Lots capped syrup, and on this side we have a frame of capped brood. I think I said it in my last video, but if you're going to do your inspections like this where you're not smoking your bees down, just be really mindful that when you go to take this box off, that it's going to be heavier than normal because you're going to have a lot more bees in it. So the first time you try that, it might kind of surprise you at the weight of the box. And I've got a frame of capped brood and larvae. A little bit of syrup around the edges. And this frame is a frame of some capped brood, but they are backfilling it with syrup. So still continuing to store more syrup up here in the top. So that's this side of the frame. We've got them backfilling those cells with syrup, and this side we have some capped brood. I'm going to maybe move my camera just a little bit closer. Just move this a little bit closer so you guys can see a little bit more. There we go. I have a lot of things. I try to keep the bees, I'm going to give them a tiny amount of smoke so I have a place to put my fingers. I think I attracted them all up to the top of the frame. I do plant stuff for my bees to kind of keep them going through dearth. So there's stuff blooming in the summer for them, but I've not had great success with that this year because we have a lot of woods on our property and a lot of wildlife, and for some reason this year the deer have pretty much eaten just about everything I planted. So I don't know if any of you have any tips on how to keep the deer away from there. Got a frame of larvae. Tiny amount of eggs in here. Checking the bottom for queen cells. I do not see a queen cell. Yep, I see two. I take that back. 2 empty queen cells here on the bottom. And this side, I've got a frame of eggs and capped brood. And a tiny amount of sugar syrup. So I'll bring these up so you can see, but as I said before, if you have any tips on how to keep deer away from the things that you plant, let me know. I know there are things like deer repellents, but I get cautious of using stuff like that because I don't know how it's going to affect the bees. I'm going to go ahead and just tear down these queen cells because they're empty and I have eggs. And where are they? So we got 2 so far, 2 queen cells. Just kind of move them out of the way. And smoke them a little bit. And I've got a frame of capped brood and larva with 1 queen cell here. Got to get a bee out of the way to see if it's empty. And it is. And on this side, got some drone brood there. Gotta move these girls out of my way. And on this side, I have a frame of eggs and larvae. So here's our side of the frame with some eggs and larvae, and I blow the bees so you can see. This is a frame of capped brood and some larvae, and right in the center at the top there is a queen cell. So I'm going to go ahead and destroy this one. Early in this bee season, I don't destroy these until I go through the hive, especially on a new hive because I don't really know the queen. I'm going to go ahead now. I really don't want this hive to swarm. And if something were to happen and the queen's not in here, I have other hives that I can use to help them make a queen, but they'd be fine on their own because they already have eggs in here. I haven't seen her yet, but once you do this for a while, you will start to kind of recognize when a hive becomes queenless because they do act very, very different. So as I'm going through here, I feel more comfortable taking down those queen cells because this hive does not act like a queenless hive at all. Very, very heavy frame here. I'm going to smoke them down a little bit because I can't get this frame out. It's very heavy. I really don't want to squish anybody in the process. Oh, beautiful capped nectar and syrup here. So this frame is a frame of capped syrup and nectar. Got a little bit of pollen. It's not 100% capped yet, but it's a lot. And another solid frame of syrup. And we've started capping that over. So there we have this side that's syrup, a tiny bit capped, really pretty frame. And you can see on this side we've got syrup as well. And our last 3 frames are the frames that they've been struggling with. So let's check them out and see if they've made any progress. Okay, so this side we've got some syrup that we had last week. I don't see maybe a little bit more progress on it. They started to cap it over. And this side is empty. So they are still kind of struggling with these last couple frames. So there is our empty side. And that is our side there with syrup. So my guess is these last 2 are empty, but we always take them out and check. They are so much louder during dearth. So we've got, come on girls, get out of the way. An empty frame here. And so much propolis. This hive has so much propolis, it's like running down the side of the hive. I have not seen any hive beetles up here so far. I always check for those when I'm doing my inspections. And another empty frame. So I'm going to put this box back together, pull it off, and we're going to go down into the bottom and see what we find. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look down here in our bottom box. Again, give them a little bit of syrup and a tiny amount of smoke. Let's see. What they got going on down here. Now, as you can see, because I didn't smoke them down, there's not as many bees in this bottom box as there would normally be, which kind of helps us get through this a little bit faster. Okay. Still have our outer frame that they really haven't drawn much on. Very busy. And on this side, we've got a frame of syrup. And is it possible that I have no queen cells on this frame? It looks like we do not. So this is a frame of syrup down here. You can see in the middle where they have been drawn those queen cells. There's none on there today. And just a little tiny bit of comb drawn out here on the back. And it's empty. Get out of the way. And this side, you'll also have a section where they were drawing a lot of queen cells that they are repairing, and we've got some capped syrup and some uncapped syrup on this side. And this side looks like a frame of syrup as well. A lot more syrup for dearth. So here you can see this side of our frame. Lots and lots of syrup, a little bit of pollen. And this side is syrup as well. This is a relatively light frame. We've got a frame of capped brood, some eggs here around the edges, and some capped syrup. Newer frame that's been drawn out. The cappings on the brood are pretty light. And this is our frame of drone brood. And the rest of these cells are empty. We put a little bit of pollen in here. So you can see these cells here, they kind of stick out a little bit farther than the other brood on the backside, which I'll show you. So those are drone, which are the male bees. They're a little bit bigger. So you can see this capped brood here on the back, relatively flat to the frame. That is a frame of female bees or worker bees. Give you a little bit more slope. Oh, I got an angry one. I got one bee around my head that does not want me here. He's trying to get me to go away. If you're newer at this and you have that, you've got bees that are kind of circling you. Those are guard bees. The easiest thing for you to do is just to stay calm. Because bees can sense when you're nervous or when you're afraid. So just stay calm. Most of the time, they'll eventually kind of give up and leave you alone. I've got a frame of pollen or bee bread, a little bit of capped syrup around the edges, and we've got some eggs in some of these empty cells. And on this side, I've got a frame of pollen again, and a little bit of capped brood. These were some of the cells that last week she had laid in, had larvae in it, and they are now capped over. So it's good to see her laying down here. And that is this side. So you can see the capped brood there at the top, and the rest of those cells are pollen. She still is laying up there in that top box, but not nearly as much as she had been. Okay guys, I took a break just for a second and moved my super over, moved my brood box over. I had some bees here from this hive and that hive that were not getting along there for a minute, so I just moved everything around and gave them a second to calm down. And we'll get back to doing our inspection. You will see that occasionally. Typically these two hives don't really have an issue. And the hive behind me is very, very gentle. I don't know if you could see on camera if she was too far away, but my cat Kiwi was out here. She was kind of laying behind that hive, but they even became a little too much for her and she had to bolt in. Okay. So here I've got some capped brood, some pollen, and This was one of their frames of pollen prior. And a frame of capped brood, a little tiny bit of pollen in here. So there we have our capped brood and pollen. And on this side is the same. Alright, get back in there. There you go. Out of the way here. And I have a frame of pollen. Some empty cells. I don't see any eggs in these cells. Like they're going through that pollen though. And this side I've got some pollen and some capped brood. So there we have that side. And this side. Okay, so I'm going to try to finish up here, but we have some bees that are not very happy. This is sometimes what you'll notice is that as you get toward the end of your inspection, down in this second deep, they really aren't happy about you being in here and they want you out. So I've got a frame of pollen here, tiny amount of capped brood, and a frame of pollen that they're sort of depleting, and the rest of these cells are empty. So here is that side of our frame, and this side. So these bees are pretty agitated right now. I've only got 3 frames left that I really have to look at. I'm going to just kind of give them a moment to calm down. And if they don't, then I'll pack everything back up and put them back together. I really don't want to agitate them any more than I have to. They're really not happy about me being in here. And that is when you have to recognize as a beekeeper that it's time to kind of pack it up and come back a different day. And that's part of safe beekeeping. Okay guys, that wraps up our week 12 inspection. As you can see, I did not finish the inspection on this hive. They did get very, very defensive. I've talked about that in previous videos, and I talked about that in my video regarding dearth. I'll link that down below so you can check that out as well. Bees sometimes get a little bit more defensive during dearth. I think that's part of what happened with the bees today. Initially, when I noticed they started to get more defensive. I thought the neighboring hive was agitating them. So I relocated the boxes, tried to kind of finish the inspection, and that wasn't working. And in that process, I noticed that there were hornets kind of flying around them, and the hornets were agitating them. So I had seen everything I needed to see. I'd seen the queen, I saw eggs, we saw the queen cells, I had destroyed those, we had looked in both boxes. I had 3 frames left to look at, and could I have done that? I probably could have, but I think as you become more experienced as a beekeeper, you realize and you know when your bees are at a point when they've kind of had enough. You can see the change in their behavior, you can smell the alarm pheromone, and my bees were at that point. The bees were not coming after me. They were agitated at the hornets, but very, very quickly when they get in that defensive mode, that can change and they can become defensive towards you. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, especially if you don't do this and you're just kind of watching YouTube videos, is that when your bees get to that point, we can't just walk away. So everything that you see laid out, we've torn the hive apart as beekeepers. We have to put that back together. So as your bees get more and more defensive, it becomes more difficult. And usually when you get to that point, you're probably not going to be able to move your bees with smoke or sugar syrup. They're going to respond to that less and less. And the thing that happens is that you end up hurting bees in the process of putting that hive back together. You either do that or you yourself get hurt in that process. So in my opinion, I'd seen everything I needed to see in the hive. It just wasn't worth it to me to continue and agitate them anymore. So I did just go ahead and pack that up. Let me know how you guys respond when you start to see your bees get agitated. Do you just kind of power through? Do you pack it up and try a different day? I'm curious to know how other beekeepers handle that. I did take the queen excluder off. I'm going to leave that off for a bit and see how they do with that up in the honey super. I did not film me putting the hive back together. I kind of cut that out for time purposes, but there was nothing up in that super. I didn't think there was going to be, but just to let you guys know that. If you have any questions on this hive or beekeeping in general, leave those comments down in the comment section below. If you found this video helpful, give it a like. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.